Yo, yo. All right, I thought it'd be kind of fun today to show you how Islam don't mess around and how it really is a slow, silent killer. And it's been under worldwide conquest since its inception in the 600s, okay? I rounded the years out, so to make it easier to talk about, I'm going to try to cover about 700 years of history in about 15 minutes or less. I don't have any links or anything. You can research this stuff and look it up for yourself like I did. I'm not making anything up, even though I wish I was. All right, so we're going to start with the 1200s and talk about the Mongolians. Okay, the Mongolians were barbarians. They were, in every sense of the word. They murdered and raped women. They killed cats and dogs. They set entire cities on fire. They were the boogeyman. And the atrocities they committed spread by word of mouth, and they were masters of psychological warfare because the stories that were told and the stuff they did, like I said, got around and it scared the shit out of everybody. So before they were even at your doorstep, you were already scared to death of them. And I mean, just according to history, the women, if they were to see them coming or saw their town or their village or city or whatever was about to be invaded, they would run to high-rise buildings and jump off and commit suicide because they'd rather die like that than get a worse fate at the hands of a Mongolian. It was that bad, apparently. All right, and this was all led by Genghis Khan that Bill and Ted love so much in that movie, right? Genghis Khan was an asshole. He really was. He was a bastard. He was a bloodthirsty monster. He even killed his half-brother over like a hunting trip. You know, this guy was at an early age, Genghis Khan, I mean, was at an early age when his father was poisoned and killed by a rival Mongolian clan. So his mom got this bright idea and went to Genghis and said, hey, you know what you should do? You ought to kill everybody. Like, that would be great revenge for your father. And Genghis bought a hook, line, and sinker. Was like, that's great. I'll do that. And that's what he did. He grew up to be this incredible, just nasty barbarian. And he created, at the time, the biggest empire the world has ever seen. Bigger than the Roman Empire. Bigger than the empire of Alexander the Great. So it wasn't no joke. And these guys were the ones that were known for creating gunpowder. Isn't that interesting? And these guys also were Islamic. They converted to Islam. And so they went from stacking bodies 50 feet high to creating 500-foot tall mosques. Genghis Khan himself, very, very superstitious and religious and spiritual and all that stuff, except for he prayed and worshipped the god of sacrifice and murder. And just to put it in another way, the Mongolians and Genghis Khan themselves believed that good news came from the south. So that tells you everything you need to know right there. So his dynasty was called the Yuan dynasty, okay? And that was from 1200 to 13. Oh, I'm losing my pen. It's not liking what I'm saying. 13 to 50. 1200 to 1350, okay? So Genghis Khan built the biggest empire, and the second biggest empire at the time was the Chinese Empire. So Genghis Khan knew that the Chinese weren't going to just let him be the biggest dog on the block without challenge. So Genghis Khan thought that he would challenge them first. Okay, and so this is the part we'll never get a straight answer on. So the Chinese got wind that Genghis Khan was going to invade and what have you, and so they started messaging each other back and forth and sending, you know, messages with on their horses with the messengers and all this kind of shit. And apparently it was something like, because that's the thing, even the history books apparently and they'll tell you that this was just supposedly what the messages say, like there's no proof. But apparently the Chinese saw him coming and they sent a message and they said, hey, we see what you're doing, you better stop. And then Genghis Khan's like, nah, I kind of like what I'm doing, I'm going to keep on going, I really don't care what you say. And then Chinese were like, well, I don't know, but you better not. And then Genghis Khan was like, okay, well then how about we just discuss this face to face in like a week? And then that's pretty much what happened, okay? So what I think was really happening, because this was all the time of the big Great Wall of China. Yeah, the big wonder of the world, this huge impenetrable fortress that was 6,000 too, gotta love that, 6,000 kilometers long. You know how Genghis Khan and his army of the Mongolians, and know how they invaded China? You know how they broke through that impenetrable fortress, that huge gigantic wall? They just went around it. That's all they did. So it's my opinion that whenever they were messaging back and forth, they weren't talking smack. They were talking about how they were giving plans and direction of how to get around the wall. But we'll never know that. So anyway, Genghis Khan and his boys certainly did. Walked in there, walked right around that wall, and started conquering parts of China. It was a decade, hundreds of years long process. Then in 1350, around 1350, Genghis Khan's dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, all right, I think I already wrote that down. The Yuan dynasty started collapsing, just like every dynasty and empire does. It collapsed due to economic problems, it collapsed due to famine, and it collapsed due to revolution. And the revolution was started by a group called the Red, as in the communists, the Red Turbans. Well, imagine what allegiance they pled to and what religion the Red Turbans were associated with. So basically what you just had was just one changing to the other, but just under a different name. Okay, so now this dynasty is called the Ming Dynasty, and it ruled from 1350 all the way to 1650. And what's interesting is that in 1550, there was this guy named Altan Khan, and he tricked the Chinese just like Muhammad did in the 600s, because they're Islamic, it's an old Islamic tactic. The Islamic forces are never defeated, they're just pushed back. They just fall back to where they regroup, they get stronger and bigger, and then they go in and then they invade. They just keep coming until they get you. That's how they work. You can never defeat them. So Altan Khan, this leader of the Mongolian army, he goes to invade China, and the Chinese, they overpower him and they start to drive him back. So as his army is retreating, he sends a message, because they start messaging again, because like I told you, we'll never know, but they start messaging each other again. And supposedly this message from Altan Khan sent to the Chinese emperor and the royal elite at the time, the council. He said, hey, let me set up shop here or there's going to be trouble. So they all laughed at him, because they're like, well, what kind of an idiot is this? You know, he's in no place to demand anything. Does he not see his army retreating? So they push him out, they get all big-headed, and they get complacent, and then what happens? Just like Muhammad, right? He went to invade Mecca, realized he's going to need more time and a bigger army, so he created this bullshit, except for this guy, Altan Khan didn't do this, but it's the same premise. Muhammad created this bullshit false peace treaty with Mecca and said, I want to attack you, and you want to attack me. For 10 years, it'll be great. They agreed. Muhammad went back, built up his army, got it bigger than it's ever been, went 2 years into that peace treaty, caught Mecca by surprise, because they weren't supposed to be under a kind of war. It was a peace treaty. They weren't supposed to be a fight. Caught him by surprise, invaded, conquered him. So Altan comes back, Altan Khan with his Mongolian army, got the Chinese completely by surprise, because they weren't expecting another fight. Not this soon, especially not by these guys. They just kicked their ass. Nope. Waltzed right in there to Beijing and could have conquered it, but he didn't. He just sent a message and then turned around and left. Historians to this day don't know why he did that. I know why he did that, at least I think I do, because that's how they roll. They instill fear, it's all psychological, it's a slow burn. Turned this ass right around and left. Then, another army comes back 100 years after that. That was in 1550, whenever that took place. This time it takes place in 1650. And the army that comes around now to challenge and to conquer and invade China are called the Manchurians, or the Manchus. Well, guess who these guys are? This is part of the Mongolian Empire. These guys are under the Mongol rule. So now they're just called the Manchurians, and they come in and they kick the Chinese ass. And then they rule from 1650 all the way to 1911. See how it's the same group, just under a different name? You know, first it's like the Arabs, and then it's the Islamics, and then it's the Mongolians, and then it's the Manchurians, and then they went west into Europe, and then they became the Nazis. It's just because even the Nazis, Those guys, when you know the stories of the Jewish concentration camps and how they made the Jews wear the six-sided star to identify what religion they were and all this kind of stuff. It was a form of humiliation and to show supremacy. The same thing with the Christians. They were supposed to wear belts and stuff like that. It was an Islamic idea. That happened way back in like the 8th or 9th century. That first started by an Islamic ruler, sultan guy in Baghdad, where he made the Christians and the Jews wear the six-sided stars and the belts to identify them. So it's just the same stuff spread all over the world, just under different names. They've never lost. They simply fall back and they build up, and then they come at you and then they conquer you. And it may take from 1200 all the way until 1600 that they finally actually completely can occupy the whole area. They just chipped away at it, bit by bit, over 400 years. But they got what they wanted, didn't they? It takes a long time to take over the entire world, but these guys are more than game to do it. So, I think that's it. I think that's it for today. Yep, all right. Thanks to my subscribers. Appreciate everybody watching.